So good. I read so many good things this month. Hello, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Mary, and today's video is going to be my October wrap-up. I did read a lot in October. I was trying to read 31 books in 31 days, which I did not quite get to, but because of the sheer quantity of books that I read, I'm going to try to make this as quick and painless as possible for everybody. So I have my stats below. As always, I'm just going to go through them really quick. In the month of October, I did read 21 books for a total of 8,238 pages. Now, this page count does not include the books that I started but did not finish in October, and it also doesn't include the page count of the graphic novel that I read, because there isn't a page count for it on Goodreads, and I don't remember what it was, but I think it was probably around 150 pages to 250, somewhere in there. But yes, moving right along. I did read from authors from 5 different countries. I read from 14 female and 7 male authors. I read from 16 white authors and 5 POC, non-Black POC. I did not read from any Black authors during the month of October, unfortunately. I read 1 book from 1874, 1 book from 1965, 1 book from 2002, 1 book from 2008, 1 book from 2009, 1 book from 2012, 3 books from 2016, 1 book from 2017, 6 books from 2018, 1 book from 2019, 2 books from 2020, and 2 books from 2021. I managed to read 2 science fiction, 2 nonfiction, 1 classic, 3 mystery thrillers, 4 fantasies, 5 romance/contemporaries, 2 literary fiction, 1 historical fiction, 1 horror, and that's it. Okay. I read no middle grade, but I did read 3 young adult and 15 adult books, and then 3 of the books that I read were not classified either way. As far as star ratings go, I had 0 1 stars, 2 2 stars, 6 3 stars, 5 4 stars, and 8 5 stars. So a pretty good month. It's an average of 3.9 stars. I did change my star rating system this month, or last month, I can't remember, but I changed it to where 1 star is I hated it, 2 stars didn't like it, 3 stars it was fine, 4 stars I liked it, 5 stars I loved it, just to make it easier. And I'm just rating things now based on my own enjoyment, because I feel like it means more to me that way. I was having books get 3 stars using like a rating system, but I would say I loved them, and then I was having books get like 4 and 5 stars that I didn't really care that much about, if that makes sense. So it is what it is. Also, no book ever really got below 3 stars, even though there were books that I actively disliked. So as far as type of book that I read, I did read 1 novella, 1 graphic novel, and 18 traditional novels, which is pretty good. I read 3 books using an ebook, 9 books I listened to as audiobooks, 6 books I read physically, and 3 books I did a combination of reading physically and listening to as an audiobook. And all of those should add up to 21. I haven't double checked this since, but hopefully it should. I'm just going to go in the order of the books that I read. So the first book that I read this month was actually called A Western World by Michael Deforge, which is a graphic novel. It's just like short stories almost. It's not one flowing narrative throughout. It's almost like semi-autobiographical short stories even, but they all have like a fantastical twist, and they're not really real. But I wouldn't be surprised to find out that they were based on real events. I gave this 3 stars on Goodreads. It was realistically like a 2.5 star. I didn't really care about it, which is why. I didn't actively dislike it, which is why I didn't give it 2 stars, because I typically give 2 stars to books that I don't like. This one I just didn't really care about either way. I found it very forgettable. The art style was nothing to write home about for me personally, and the actual plot wasn't really existing for me. So the first full-length novel that I finished during the month of October was The Library Book by Susan Orlean. This is about Susan Orlean's foray into the Los Angeles library system. It's purported to be a true crime book about the arsonist who burned the library down in the 80s, I think. But what it actually is like more of an interwoven story of like the history of the library system in Los Angeles with a little bit of history of libraries everywhere. And then she briefly discusses the fact that this library was burned down and they never caught the person who did it, but they have like 1 main suspect. So I didn't love this. I gave this 3 stars. I thought it was fine. That's the 3-star rating, but this wasn't really anything super special to me. I do think if you're interested in the library systems, this would be a good book to like read through, especially if you're interested in Los Angeles's library system. But I was looking for a true crime about an arsonist, but definitely not a bad book. It's well researched and the voice is really strong, but it just wasn't something that I particularly loved reading. The next book I finished was The Lovely Bones by Alice Siebold, which is a mystery about a young girl who is brutally murdered, and you are getting this story from her point of view as she watches her family deal with grief and grapple with losing their child slash sister so unexpectedly, and then also figuring out who did it, essentially. So half of it is her watching, or most of it, I would say, is her watching her family down from heaven. And then there's also a brief exploration of what the afterlife is like for her, which was really interesting. I really enjoyed this book. It's very dark, and it is very atmospheric and very interesting in the way it portrays grief, and especially Susie's grief with dealing with her own death. So you get to really grapple with grief as the person who is being grieved, because her life was taken away from her at such a young age. This was a pretty good book. Again, I gave it 4 stars. I would recommend. Then I got my hold in for A Sky Beyond the Storm by August TBR, which is the 4th and final book in the In Ember and the Ashes series. And I gave this one 4 stars as well. I gave the 1st and 3rd book in the series 5 stars. And the 2nd book I gave 3 stars, I think. I was not a huge fan of the 2nd book. But this was a really strong conclusion, I think, to this series. This is a YA fantasy series, and it basically follows a couple different points of view. There's a big rebellion plot line, and it's about these people. They have to go undercover as slaves, and then there's other things happening with, like, a military academy, warfare. There's, like, a really good villain in this book. I really, really liked the villain. And then there's an interesting magical, fantastical element that I feel like really gets woven in more in the 2nd and 3rd book, is when that, like, gets really laid down. I didn't love all the choices that Saboteur made in this. I didn't love all of the storylines, but I did hate one character in the 1st book and absolutely loved her by the end of the 4th book. So, and it did make me cry. So if you like that series, I definitely think it's worth finishing out. And if you're looking for just a solid YA fantasy series, I don't read a ton of YA fantasy anymore, so I'm sure that it is not that unique and not that incredible or whatever to people who read a lot of YA fantasy. But it definitely scratched an itch for me, and I'm really glad that I read it. The next couple of books that I'm going to talk about, I actually read as part of a reading blog that I have on my channel, so I will link the blog somewhere if you want to hear my complete thoughts on these books. But I did read The Kiss Quotient, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, Good Me, Bad Me, and The Dream Daughter, all as a part of this weekend reading blog that, again, I will link. The Kiss Quotient is the 1st book in a series of standalone romances. I gave this one 5 stars. I also gave the 2nd book 5 stars when I read it last year. It was one of my favorite books of the year. I didn't like the 1st one as much as I liked the 2nd one, but it still was a solid read. I definitely loved the characters. I love the autism representation in these books. If you have not read them, I would give them a shot. The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks is a nonfiction book about Henrietta Lacks, who is the woman who the HeLa cells were taken. If you don't know anything about it, I'm not going to be the person who can explain it really well because I'm not a science person, but I did think this book was really interesting, and I definitely think it should be required reading for more people. I've heard from a few people that it was required reading for them, and I kind of wish it had been required reading for me as well. But I also give that one 5 stars. Wow, I didn't realize this was like a weekend of 5-star reads. All of them were 5 stars. Good Me, Bad Me by Ali Land is a mystery thriller about a girl whose mother is a serial killer, and she has to turn her mother in as a serial killer at the beginning of the book, and then the whole time she's wondering if she is as bad as her mom is. I gave that one 5 stars. I thought the voice was incredible. I really enjoyed reading that one and being inside of the girl's head. And then The Dream Daughter by Diane Chamberlain, I also gave 5 stars, which is a historical fiction set in the 70s with a sci-fi twist about a woman who was pregnant in the 70s, but her baby has a heart defect that in the 70s there's no cure for, but in the early 2000s there is, and so she time travels to 2001 in order to fix her baby's heart, and the story just goes on from there. That one was really, really good. I loved that book. The next couple of books that I read, I did not read in a blog, so I will be talking more in depth about them. One of them, I don't know where it is, which, oh, here it is, okay. The Mars Room by Rachel Kushner. I gave this 3 stars. I thought it was fine. This is like a literary fiction about a woman who's in prison in the early 2000s. It like traverses several years, but it's like definitively set at a start date, and I don't know if I'm missing some context for why that date was important. But she's in the California prison system. It's just about her life there. You follow from a couple different points of view that don't all tie together, which is one of the reasons I didn't totally love this book. I felt like it was weird that we got points of view of the point of views from some characters who like didn't really pertain to what, in my opinion, was the main plot line. But it's about this woman who was a stripper, and she has a stalker and all this stuff. So you find out, like, why she's in prison. Like, you know, she has hurt somebody. You don't know really what has happened. And you find that out throughout. You also know she has a young son the whole time, but you also find out more about that. The son was the most compelling part of this story to me, and it was definitely just a plot device. Like, it wasn't really about her relationship with her son. That was just the motivation that the author gave her for wanting to fix her circumstances. But I don't know. I don't know about this one. I'm sure, like, a lot of people like this, I think, but I just don't know if I'm one of them. So if you've read this, let me know your thoughts. Then I got another hold-in for my library, another couple holds-in, I guess. So next I read The Tiger and the Acrobat by Susanna Tamaro, which is a novella about a tiger who is born in the wild, and she's obsessed with humans. And one day she decides to strike out on her own when she's, like, grown up, and she goes and finds a human man to befriend. And then it's just about her life as she sort of goes through whatever. I talked about this in a recent read-alikes video. I think if you liked The Little Prince for all of the introspective and, like, learning about the world through an innocent character's eyes type of thing, I think you'd really like this one as well. It was very cute. The illustrations are really cute. It is, like, partially illustrated. It's just it was a really nice book. I really liked it. I gave it 4 stars. I didn't think it was anything, like, emotionally impactful enough for me to want to give it 5 stars. But, you know, I did really, really enjoy it, so I'm glad I read it. Then I read Dune by Frank Herbert, which I gave 2 stars. I did not like. Yeah, I don't really know what to say about it. Dune is a sci-fi book. I can tell you what I didn't like, but I can't really tell you about the plot, because that's one of the things I didn't like, is I wasn't able to follow the plot super well. I thought it was too long. I didn't think the writing was very good. All in all, I have very specific tastes in sci-fi, which is something that I'm realizing about myself. And I much prefer sci-fi that is grounded in, like, reality to some extent. So science fiction, like The 3-Body Problem, where it's set present day and you are contacted with aliens, or at least at one point it's set in present day. Or, you know, even things like time travel twists. I like those. I like more tangible sci-fi, whereas this felt more like fantasy, but in space. But that just doesn't, for whatever reason, my brain doesn't like that very much. So I wasn't a super big fan. I am planning on reading the second book, Dune Messiah, I think is the second one. And so that one's much shorter. It's less than 300 pages, which I think Dune probably could have been in the, like, 350 to 400 page mark. It was way longer than I think it needed to be. So I am excited to continue with that. I don't know if excited is the right word. I am planning on continuing with that at some point. And I also would like to watch the movie. So we'll see. I read Hero of Ages, which I loved. I gave this one 5 stars as well. This is the 3rd book in the Mistborn trilogy. The series is going to be like 10 books long, the Mistborn section, but I think they're just all set in the same world with the same magic system. But they're like, I think the second era is like 1,000 years after this one, so at some point I'll pick that up. But this was a great conclusion to the first, like, trilogy from these. This basically follows a street urchin named Vin, who finds out that she has this ability to ingest metals and get powers from them. And in this world, if you can get powers from one metal, then you are a Misting. And if you can get powers from all of the metals, then you are a Mistborn. And then it's just about, at the beginning of the first book, you find out that we are in this world, and it's been 1,000 years since the Dark Lord of this, like, great battle already happened with good versus evil, and the evil won. And so it's about this uprising, and people are trying to sort of take back their kingdom and their freedom. So yes, I love these books. I think they're great. And if you are interested in reading Brandon Sanderson, or just getting into adult fantasy, but you don't read a ton of it, I don't read a ton of it either, and I did not find these hard to get into at all. So yeah, I would highly, highly recommend the Mistborn series. I think they're worth the hype. The next book that I read was This Could Hurt by Jillian Medoff, which follows several different characters from this company. They all work in the HR department at this company. It's set in 2010, so a few years after the Great Recession in 2008, but they're still having issues with needing to let people go, and then they have to go on hiring sprees, and it's definitely grounded in something that was really real and what really happened to a lot of companies and to a lot of people. But what's interesting about this book is it follows all these different perspectives, and so you get to see them. I think it's set over the a span of like a year. I thought that the voices were all really unique in here. I just didn't love the story, if that makes sense. I gave this 3 stars. I thought it was good. And I think if you like this kind of thing, and if you're really into character-driven stories, then I think you might really like this. If I'm gonna read a character-driven story, I need it to be about one character. I just don't get attached to like the multiple POV thing. I needed to have a strong plot pushed forward for that to work for me. So 3 stars, it was fine, but I think it's worth it if you want to read it. And the next book I actually have on my Kindle, which is Where'd You Go, Bernadette by Maria Simple. I gave this one 3 stars as well. And then I ended up watching the movie, and the movie is really, really cute. I really liked it. This is about a woman named Bernadette who goes missing one day. And the whole book, you start off knowing that Bernadette is missing, and you spend the whole like book reading emails between different people who are parents at the school that Bernadette's daughter goes to, emails between Bernadette's husband and his assistant, and all these like communications between people to try to figure out what has happened to Bernadette and when she went missing. What I will say, Bernadette doesn't go missing until like the 75% mark. So for me, it didn't really feel like that much of a mystery. Like, it was definitely cute and funny. It just wasn't what I was looking for. I was hoping that it would be like maybe flashbacks, which I guess the whole thing technically was a flashback, but because the whole book, it opened with Bernadette is missing and then it had flashbacks the whole time, it didn't really feel like flashbacks. So, but I will say, you know, it was cute. It was cute. It was fine. 3 stars. I read 2 books that I did a reading vlog over. This was my Reading 2 Hype New Releases vlog. I read False Witness by Karen Slaughter, and I also read My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. One of these books I liked, one of these books I really did not like. Watch that vlog if you are interested in my thoughts, but these are both 2021 releases. The next book that I read, I did not expect to like as much as I did. I was actually really shocked. Even while I was reading it, I didn't think it was going to get the rating that it did until the ending happened. But that's 28 Summers by Ellen Hilderbrand. Yeah. This book took me by surprise. So, as you can imagine, it spans 28 years, but it's about this couple who meet on Nantucket when they're in their early 20s, and it's a girl, and she's having a bachelor party for her brother, and it's her brother's college roommate. And so she's talked to him on the phone a few times. Starts in the early 90s and ends in 2020, but the whole time you know that in 2020, he is married to the woman who's running for president, and she is dying from cancer. And so you're just watching their relationship over these 28 years as they come back every year over Labor Day weekend. He comes back to Nantucket and stays with her. They both have kids with different people. They both get married, or well, he gets married. But they have different lives for the rest of the year, but they just have this relationship one weekend every year. And I have a lot of problems with that as a premise because I don't find that very romantic. I know that people do, and there's a whole movie called Same Time Next Year, which they actually reference in the book, and she says that this book is based off of that movie. And the premise of the movie is that no matter what, their whole lives, these people get together at the same time every year. Or like that movie One Day with Anne Hathaway, except for they end up, I'm not going to spoil that, actually, never mind. But I think what was so frustrating to me about this book, or what's so frustrating to me usually about that concept, is that I just feel like if you really loved a person that much, you would try to be with them. And I don't think that's different in this. I just think that the way this was done, it made you sort of understand the relationship that was happening. I don't know. I really loved this. I ended up really liking it. So I did not expect to, because again, that premise is not something that I find super romantic, or even, I just don't buy into it, I guess. It feels like upsetting because it's like you're cheating on your person who you like committed to, but you've made more of a commitment to this because you're not giving this up for the rest of your life. But I don't know. Anyways, all of that to say, I really enjoyed it, and I was surprised. I gave it 5 stars. I think I've said that a bunch. The next thing I read, I actually buddy read with 2 of my friends here on BookTube. Amanda at her Pacific Northwest Washington Life, and Hugo at the Scientist Reading World. I will have both of their channels linked down below. But we read Scythe, Alma by Neil Schusterman. This is the first in a YA dystopian trilogy, and it's set in the future where mankind has overcome like all diseases and we really can't die anymore. So there are these elite like figures, people called Scythes, who are trained to kill. It's called gleaning, and that's the only way that they have like population control. This book follows two main characters, Citra and Rowan, who are both taken to be the apprentice of the Scythe, and you just follow them and their journey as becoming apprentices. I really liked this. I gave this 4 stars. I thought the world was really unique. I thought the writing was really immersive. It was really easy to get through. We did read this over 4 weeks, but I probably could have read it in like 2 or 3 days because it was just very engrossing. I will say there's a romance subplot in this, which there always is in YA fantasy, and I didn't buy it at all. I just really didn't like it. I almost gave this book 3 stars because of how much I disliked the romance plotline. And I know it's only going to get more prominent throughout the books, but it just wasn't for me, you know? I'm not the person who thinks that there always has to be romance in a book. And I also am not the person who thinks that just because there's a boy and a girl character, they have to have a romance. I don't know. That part wasn't for me, but the rest of the book really was, and I do recommend it, and I'm looking forward to continuing in that series. Then I read a book that I got for my birthday. So my boyfriend got me Dark Matter by Blake Crouch, and this I devoured. This is a sci-fi thriller twist about this guy who is kidnapped on his way home from a bar one night. He goes to a bar to like get drinks with a friend, and when he's leaving, he gets kidnapped by someone in a mask. And the last thing he remembers before waking up is that the person asked him if he was happy in his life. And he wakes up and he's in a life that is not his. And he's trying to get back to his wife and son in his life. It's got a really fun twist on like the multiverse thing. I loved this book. I thought it was great. And this is the kind of sci-fi that I'm into, I guess. This was really, really good. I gave this 5 stars as well. I thought this was fantastic. I flew through it as well. So I'm very, very glad that I finally got to read this. I get what all the hype is about. This is another one of those books that I've been hearing about for years. And it's worth the hype. So pick it up if you have not already. If you, like me, were holding out no longer, please go read that book. I want to read Blake Crouch's other stuff because that was a wild ride. The next thing that I finished was Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, which still has a bookmark in it, even though I finished it. This is fine. I loved this book. This follows Alex Stern, who is like a high school dropout turned drug addict living in California. She's 20 years old and she can see ghosts. And so in this world, Yale, and the secret societies at Yale specifically, are like people who can do magic. And they, like, when you do a magic ritual, ghosts are attracted to that. So they want people who can, they usually have to take this, like, drug to see ghosts. But when they find out that Alex can just see ghosts on her own, they recruit her to be a part of the society, the Ninth House, which is called Lethe, I think. The audiobook pronounced it Lethe. I was saying Leigh, but I don't know how you pronounce it. But she joins this, and there's like another mystery aspect in here because there's like portal magic, and there's, you know, people who can tell the future based on human entrails. It's really, really good. Very dark, very spooky, very atmospheric, truly a masterpiece. I loved this book, and I cannot wait for there to be a sequel. And I know there's supposed to be, but nothing's announced yet, so I'm a little bummed, but I'm very excited that I finally read this. I've been wanting to read this forever, and I'm glad that I finally got around to it, because it was so, so good. So, so good. And unfortunately, I'm going to end it on a mediocre note, so apologies in advance for that. But I also read Far from the Madding Crowd by Thomas Hardy. Hardy. Yes. Okay. This, I gave 3 stars. It was fine. I listened to this primarily as an audiobook, which could have affected my score. The audiobook wasn't bad by any means, but I just think perhaps maybe if I'd read it physically along with the audiobook, or just read it physically, I might have gotten more out of it, but it also would have taken me forever, I think. This follows a woman, Bathsheba Everdeen, and it's allegedly about her life in this fictional pastoral town in England in the 1860s, and she has 3 different suitors, and her decisions, she makes poor decisions in love, essentially, and it affects her, like, life. Sorry, my back started hurting, so I had to move the camera, so hopefully this isn't that bad. But I was talking about this. My gripe with this, I think, is that it was purported to be about Bathsheba Everdeen, but it literally was about all of the love interests, and then not really about her at all. She was just, like, incidental in this, which kind of sucks. But I guess it's to be expected from the times. Yeah, I think I just wanted this to be more, not even more feminist really, but just more about the character that it was supposed to be about. And it just felt like she wasn't a real character to me. I don't know. I didn't love this. I did think it was fine, but I also feel like I could have benefited from being in a class and discussing this book. So, sorry to end it on such a downer, but hopefully that wasn't too long. I think this is probably only going to be like a 20-something minute video, which is good considering I read 20-something books this month. But yes, those are the 21 books that I read in the month of October. Let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of these and how you felt about them. Also, let me know if you like Dune and you think I'm stupid, because a lot of people have been doing that recently, but I'm just kidding. Don't say that. If you say that, I'm just going to block you, so sorry. But thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, make sure to give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel before you go, because I do post 2 videos most weeks. I don't know if there'll be 2 videos this week, but most weeks there are 2 videos. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye!
I should have told you that I loved you.